Welcome to Tiny Show and Tell Us, the bonus series where you write in with your favorite science news or factoid, we read your email aloud, and then we dive deeper. I'm Sam Jones, and I'm here with my co-host, Deboki Chakravarti.
Hi, Sam. I'm so excited to do this. Last time, we talked about data storage technology, which was quite a stretch. We also talked about morning sickness, and that was less of a stretch, but we got through it. And so a reminder for all of you listeners that if you have a story you'd like for us to cover on Tiny Show and Tell Us, whether or not you think it's in our wheelhouse, maybe sometimes the more out of our wheelhouse, the better. All you have to do is write us an email. You can email us at tinymatters@acs.org, or you can fill out the form that's in our episode description. So, Sam, I'm going to start us off today.
Perfect.
I've got a message from listener Travis, who sent us a few anecdotes that might be interesting to talk about, so we picked one. So, Travis, we're going with your first story. So, this is what Travis writes. I was diagnosed with anaphylaxis to peanuts when I was 2 and had, as my mom phrases it, every symptom on the anaphylaxis list but the heart attack. So I avoided any chance/trace of peanuts for most of my life. When I was 16 or so, I went to an immunotherapy clinic. For me, the process consisted of about 3 months of daily dosing, doubling the concentration of peanut being consumed every 2 weeks. So this started with a dilute suspension and then a more concentrated one, then with weighted fractions of peanuts.
Interesting.
Yeah. At the end of it, I was having 2 peanuts each day, which meant that I no longer had to worry about foods that were, quote, may contain peanuts, which made it much less of a hassle when I went away to university, as well as giving my parents a lot of peace of mind. Best, Travis.
Cool.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Travis, for writing in about your experience. And I'm just going to start off with a quicker overview of allergy immunotherapy, and then we're going to get into the history because I thought it was super interesting. So the idea of allergy immunotherapy, which is what Travis is describing, is to basically increase the amount of allergen that someone's exposed to. So kind of like what Travis is talking about, each time they went in, they got like a little bit more of that peanut exposure. The goal is not necessarily to cure. Like that's, ideal. That would be great if it happens. But really the goal is to make sure that you're getting to a point where the amount of the allergen that you need to be exposed to before you have a reaction goes up. So in Travis's case, like being able to get 2 peanuts in a day, like that's incredible, right? That's such an improvement over having to be worried about like a trace amount of peanut. And so there's oral immunotherapy, there's also shots, it takes on different forms. And getting into the history of this was so fascinating because, Sam, I don't know what your experience was like, but I feel like I didn't hear about allergy immunotherapies until maybe like 15 years ago or so.
So I will say that I only have heard of it because my dad is super allergic to cats. And so I remember him when I was really young going in and getting allergy shots. And I didn't at the time like understand really how it worked, but I generally understood that like it had something to do with tolerance and building up your tolerance to, in his case, cats.
Yeah. So you were familiar with it when you were younger. I feel like I didn't like know about allergy shots until like college or grad school or something. So I just like had this idea that they were a relatively recent thing, but they actually go back a little bit. Like they go back before I think we even really understood what was going on with allergies, which I thought was fascinating. So in 1819, there's this English doctor named John Bostock. I'm going to say Bostock. It's Bostock, who described this thing where
sounds right.
Yeah. Every year around mid-June, he'd start having these issues with like his eyes and his nose and his chest. And he kept following this over 9 years, and he kept finding more cases of people experiencing this. And he thought it was heat and sun. But he also acknowledged that there's like this common like idea that maybe it was related to the smell of new hay. And they were calling this thing hay fever.
Okay, fascinating. I had never thought about where that came from. Yes, please.
Yeah. Yeah. I just love that story where he's like, I think it's heat, but people also think it's hay. And they've been calling it hay fever. And so this story gets a little bit better from here. This next science. I love these old science experiments.
Yeah.
A doctor in Manchester named Charles Harrison Blackley wanted to investigate this further. And so he did this by shoving grass pollen up his nose when it wasn't hay season.
This is the most scientist thing ever. And I think it's become less so when people started to acknowledge that like things could be harmful to them.
Yeah.
But just the like, I'm going to experiment on myself. I'm going to sample on myself. I'm going to inject myself with this. I'm going to inhale this thing. I'm going to like, I mean, you have to respect the passion.
Yeah. He did also do like some more traditional kind of things like doing daily pollen counts and looking at how that was corresponding to the onset of hay fever symptoms. So that I think also helped. And this was part of how we started understanding like, hey, hay fever is a reaction to pollen. And this is important in the story of immunotherapy because following this is when we start to get doctors thinking like, hey, could we maybe prevent this? And so I found a few different examples of this from the turn of the 20th century. There was a doctor named H. Halbert Curtis who reported using injections of flower and pollen extract in people.
I'm just like, what I'm picturing them doing to... It's just like the most crude, rudimentary thing ever where they're just like, let's take a pestle and like grind this up. I'm making this up. But like,
I think that's probably a big part of it.
Okay, well.
I mean, I don't know for sure because I don't have their methods section in front of me, but I think it's like kind of like that.
That would align with what was happening in other areas of medicine during the time. So like.
Sure, why not?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, so there's also a doctor named William Dunbar who wanted to see if there was like a way to do this. So I think he had like gotten an injection of grass pollen, didn't go so great, had kind of a strong reaction. But this was also a time when people were making diphtheria antitoxins in horses. Like they were using horses to make these antitoxins. So he wanted to see if there was something similar that he could do. So he injected grass pollen into horses to get a pollen anti-serum from it, then powdered it so that people could put it on their eyes and nose daily. And I think it was like sort of effective, but it seemed like people started getting sensitized to that. So then he decided to try out combining grass pollen extract and that anti-serum in increasing doses. And in general, it seemed to be helping people's symptoms go down. But like one of the big works in this area came in 1911 from Leonard Noon and then John Freeman, who I think took up some of the work after this. They developed this treatment where you would give small doses of pollen extract and build up that intensity to help alleviate hay fever. So that's sort of like the early roots of allergy immunotherapy. But what was fascinating to me is I also found a report that's completely unrelated to hay fever. It was from 1908. It was by this doctor who was treating a 13-year-old who couldn't eat egg in any kind of form. Like as a baby, he would spit up any food that had a trace of egg in it. He couldn't eat cake. There was a small bun that was eggless, but then it wasn't eggless because actually there's like an egg kind of like wash to it.
Yeah.
And all of them were really like just not great for this kid. So this doctor made these pills with tiny little bits of cooked and raw egg in it and started out with like super small doses and then gradually like started increasing it. And eventually the kid was able to eat an egg.
Wow.
And I just want to be clear, this was done by a doctor. Please do not try this at home.
Yeah, as always,
allergy immunotherapy can work, but yeah.
Right. We are never giving you medical advice on tiny matters.
Yes.
I just want to, we'll be we're clear about that.
Yes. But I just thought that was so fascinating that there were doctors doing this in the early 20th century. And like from there, the treatments have come a long way. Like Travis was getting, a therapy that is a lot more standardized and rigorously done than, this doctor in 1908 just seeing if this pill would work. And so over time, these treatments have gotten a lot better. But apparently it wasn't until the beginning of the 21st century that people really, I think, started going like a lot harder on allergy immunotherapy. So it's become so much more prevalent today as like people have been making more progress.
Wow, that is so fascinating. I just want to say I feel like this should actually be a full episode because I want to know so much more about each of these things.
Right.
It makes me think a little bit about, although not the same thing, similar is early exposure to allergens for babies. Because I know like I've been doing that with my daughter since she was 4 months old, exposing her to peanuts, walnuts, cashews, egg, all these things.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a big part of it.
Yeah.
Like we're still so early in our understanding of allergies because early exposure used to not be recommended in the US.
Totally.
Like that, and that actually made things worse.
Right. Yeah. And then there was this, I mean, I think over the last decade, that perspective has been shifting pretty consistently.
Pretty starkly, too, especially with peanuts.
Totally. And then there was this very compelling study showing that early exposure therapy, it seems the way to go. Again, not giving medical advice here, but I think it was like 200,000 kids in Australia and looking at outcomes. And the takeaway was when a kid is young, like 4 or 5 months, that is the time to start exposing them.
Right.
And so I started doing that. Like, again, really small amounts, being very cautious, looking for rash, looking for anything else. But food allergies, I mean, any type of allergy, but something that could lead to anaphylaxis is so scary. And so,
Yeah.
That's on my mind.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, so we found out that my son is allergic to some tree nuts. So we've been sort of in this world of like figuring it out. And it is weird because we've also realized, like, because this field is still so in flux, like it's easy to get very conflicting advice from doctors. And we've had to sort of like think about who we want providing care based on the advice we've been given, because we're just like, that advice seems very outdated. Like that seems based on really a different understanding of like what allergies are like at this age. So it's just been crazy to see kind of how fast the field must be moving for people who are currently in the field to be operating on advice that feels a little outdated.
Simple and Clean is a show where hosts Misha Stanton and Mayana Barron and friends talk about Kingdom Hearts, a little video game franchise about really big feelings. Join them as they discuss the plot, characters, world building, music, fashion, fan base, and societal impact of a thing that, by all means, probably shouldn't even exist. Never heard of Kingdom Hearts? That's okay. I hadn't either. They're here to break it down for you and explain why they love it and hopefully convince you that this weird little story deserves a place in your heart. Each week, they attempt to unravel how this deceptively expansive game series has touched an entire generation of deeply earnest weirdos. And along the way, realize that what they're talking about might not just be a video game, but a whole lot more. New episodes every Sunday, wherever you listen to podcasts. So subscribe to Simple and Clean in your podcast app now. That's Simple and Clean from the Multitude Podcast Collective. All right, Deboki, so I have something for you from listener Justice. Justice wrote in saying, "Hey, you guys. First of all, I'm sending vibes of love in this chaos. Y'all, I'm just a deli clerk at Safeway who loves your podcast, but I have two very cool news stories that are out of Southern California, where I'm from. I now live in Humboldt County. Here's a story about the fires." So, Justice, a billion apologies. This is the case with pretty much every tiny show and tell us that we're sent, is that we have a real stack of them at this point. And so this was sent, I want to say 10 months ago, 10, 11 months ago. So apologies. The fire story is obviously not as relevant now, although very important. But then the other story that Justice sent us was related to reef balls. And so we're going to get into the reef ball story today. We will link to the YouTube video that Justice sent. And it's cool because I'm going to talk about these reef balls, but it's nice to have a visual. I'm going to try and describe them, but I'm sure my description is lacking. So just you should watch the video. So the segment that Justice sent is about reef balls. They're made up of smashed up oyster shells from an aqua farm mixed with concrete. And they really look like that is what they're composed of when you see them.
I'm imagining something like very like Little Mermaid-ish, but like
right.
If Little Mermaid was set in like an urban jungle.
Yeah, no, that's actually perfect. They actually look like something you would see in a kid's jungle gym.
Yeah.
Is like really what they look like to me. And so their purpose is to restore marine habitats by providing an artificial home for corals, for fish, for shellfish. Essentially, these are fake mini reefs that are a sphere with a bunch of holes in it. And so the idea is to seed the bay with these reef balls in hopes that animals will come along, find a home. And as of April 2025, which is when this video came out, there were 360 reef balls in San Diego Bay on the seafloor of Chula Vista Wildlife Reserve. So I actually lived in San Diego for 5 years. I know exactly where this is. The video is really cool. You can see all these animals and plants starting to inhabit these reef balls, which is just, it's cool. I mean, it's some proof that it's working, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, love the reef balls. But Deboki, you found something reef ball related, but different vibe.
Oh, for sure.
Which is cremation. So there's a charity called Eternal Reefs. They're based in Florida, and they offer a service where people can actually ask for their cremated remains to be added to reef balls. So the ashes are mixed with the concrete to make these domes, and then they're placed in these specific regulated areas. And then I thought this was so cool. Friends and family will actually get the GPS coordinates of the reef dome to know where their loved ones' remains are, which is like, I think so much more compelling than just like sitting in an urn on a fireplace mantle, but like to each their own.
Right.
Okay. So the reef balls, they're 1 meter high, 2 meters wide, and they weigh between 250 to 1,800 kilograms. which is about 550 to 4,000 pounds.
That's huge.
It is huge. Yeah, they're quite heavy. I guess if they're supposed to be like mini reefs, we need them to stay where they are. So they need to be pretty heavy. And so they also have this rough surface. And so that really allows for plants, animals, and corals to really grow on them, right? They have these like little grooves.
Yeah.
And so as of 2022, there were around 3,000 memorial reef balls that have been put in the water by this organization. A reef ball costs between $3,000 and $7,500, which is, compared to a lot of other things, like that's not that much money. Mm-hmm. But even though it's just concrete and shells, it takes time. It takes labor.
Yeah. And they're heavy.
And they're heavy. And the article that you found also notes some of the potential environmental pitfalls of reef balls. So manufacturing concrete that emits greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide, and so does cremation. So even if we're talking about having this cool alternative way of burying a loved one, and in a way that, you know, there is this like positive environmental impact because you're creating this home for wildlife. Cremation itself still is like a process of just burning a body and emitting a lot of fumes from that. And so it's not perfect, but it is still really cool. Yeah. And I'm so glad that you found this. Yeah. And thank you, Justice.
I found this and was like, this is the ultimate Sam story now. Like it started really out Sam because it's in San Diego. And now we've made it full Sam because there are dead bodies involved.
Oh my gosh, Deboki, you know me so well.
Actually, I was going to ask, would you do a reef ball burial? Would you get buried?
Would I do a reef burial? I think I would want to know... Would my family, I need to look at all of the areas in which these reef balls are dropped.
Right.
Like, are all of them off the coast of Florida? Could my family go visit me? Like, what?
I feel like it was spread out along the coast, like along the East Coast, but I don't remember. But yeah, like how easy would it be to visit?
Yeah, because I do really like the idea in theory. Like, I think it's pretty fun. I think I still am more leaning toward like a ground burial, but where I could essentially become compost, like not like shooting me filled with, you know, embalming fluid and like in like a metal casket or something. Like, to me, like becoming part of the earth is kind of like a more peaceful way of thinking about death.
Right.
But I do also like the utility. Like, I'm a pretty practical person, and I do like the utility of a reef ball.
Yep.
So
yeah.
I don't know.
Because I've always like leaned towards cremation just because culturally, like that's how we do it. Man, this got grim, but it's also fascinating to think about.
Yeah.
I feel like over the past few years, in various things I've worked on, the question of like how to be buried or how, like what to do with your body in the most environmentally friendly way has actually come up quite a few times, which is fascinating because it's like kind of wild to think about, but it also is like kind of important to think about. Like figuring out what you would want to be done with your body is a huge question. So
totally. Like maybe this is just like way more information than our listeners want, but like I just created an estate plan with my husband because we had a baby.
What you got to do when you have a baby.
Yeah. And like we had to sit down and be like, okay, we've definitely talked about this, but like we haven't formally talked about what we want to happen to us.
Yeah.
And my husband is really funny. Like he's definitely someone who's like, I'm dead. Like, who cares? Like, and I'm sort of, you know, aligned with that train of thought, but I'm like fascinated just thinking about it.
Yeah. I mean, there's always body farms.
There are always body farms. And that is part of the conversation as well.
Well, on that note, thank you to Justice and Travis for submitting to Tiny Show and Tell Us, a bonus series from Tiny Matters, created by the American Chemical Society and produced by Multitude.
You can send us an email to be featured in a future Tiny Show and Tell Us episode at tinymatters@acs.org, or you can fill out the form that's linked in the episode description. We'll see you next time.